So I think I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have a full schedule tonight. My name's Margaret Meinke. I get to be your facilitator tonight. I actually asked for this job because I think it's fun. And Maureen is going to be my backup in case my internet gets unstable. I told her I can't count on myself being stable, but my internet, sometimes it says it's unstable. So she's going to watch that for me. And we're excited that you're joining us for our All California Zoom call. Since we got more leaders in California, we haven't been having Zoom meetings, but we're kicking things off now with all 6 broadband leaders here. We're going to introduce Great Broads, and I'm going to hand it over to Sarah Husby to tell us all about Great Broads because she is our executive director. Hey, Sarah, thanks for
Hi,
coming.
Margaret. Thank you. And hello to everyone in Zoom land across the country. I am actually in Durango, Colorado right now. So it is 7:30 and Julie is a couple of more hours ahead of me. It's wonderful to see so many broads and bros and wild place enthusiasts and our partners who are joining us tonight. I'm really excited that we are back to doing these wonderful California quarterly meetings. For those of you who this might be your first ever Great Old Broads for Wilderness experience, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Great Old Broads for Wilderness, for those of you who don't know, is a women-led national grassroots organization, and we engage and inspire activism to preserve and protect wilderness and wildlands. And so we do that through our 4 pillars, which is education, advocacy, stewardship, and fun. And the work would not be done if it wasn't for our incredible grassroots organizers on the ground who are our broadband leaders, and the members who are all of you. So thank you for the incredible work that you are doing out there in California. As Margaret mentioned, we have 6 broadbands in California, and we have a total of 43 broadbands in 18 states around the country. So it is a pleasure to be here tonight. I am really excited for all the speakers and to learn everything that you all are doing out in California and be inspired by you, because honestly, the best part about my job is talking to our members and our volunteers and our grassroots broadband leaders. You inspire me, and it really is that part of my job that I leave just feeling, oh my gosh, the energy from what you all do just trickles down. So thank you so much, and I'll kick it back over to you, Margaret.
Thank you, Sarah. I was so glad that you came out to see the sea lions at La Jolla. When you first became executive director, we had that wonderful field trip, and L'Oreal came on that field trip as well. So we got some excellent photos of the sea lions in La Jolla. Julie, would you like to explain your role? You're new to Great Broads and you're a fresh face, and here you're calling in from Georgia. That's a ways.
Yes, hi everyone. So I am Julie Savage. I am one of 3 grassroots regional coordinators for Great Old Broads for Wilderness. I help support our broadbands in California, so the 6 that are represented here: Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, the Northeast, our GRITS, our Georgia broadband, our new mobile broadband. So I'm a little bit of all over the place, and I am residing in Georgia, far southern Georgia, on the Georgia-Florida line. So it sounds like it was a little chilly in parts of California, but it was 80 here today. So I sat on the porch most of the day while I was working. But it is a pleasure to be here and be supporting California in this way. And I am very excited to be a part of Broads now. It's been about 4 months.
We're happy to have you. We really enjoy the support that we get from staff and all of this good stuff that you do. Yeah, that's right. Click, 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 click. So I am excited to hear our speaker tonight. I met Mary O'Brien at the rendezvous that I went to in Colorado. That's the name they call our leadership retreat in Colorado. And she was speaking about the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. And I found out she did most of her research on bees in California and got her PhD in California. She can tell you her background, but I got so excited. I said, will you please come present to us all this wonderful information? So she agreed to do that. And she's also been on the Great Old Broads board and very active and involved in so much environmental work. She's just a wonderful resource. So Mary, without further ado, would you like to introduce yourself, a little background, biography, and tell us what you're going to talk about?
Well, it's great to see all of you, and it's great that you're keeping together. I know that in Eastern Oregon, several broadbands work together, and it's been really, really effective when they've joined together on particular activities. So this is great. I actually grew up in Southern California in Montebello,
Woohoo!
and
Yay!
then went to Whittier College, was gone for a number of years back in Wisconsin and Yugoslavia, and then came back to California, and that's where I got my doctorate in botany at what was then Santa Ana Botanic Garden, now called Claremont Graduate University, and then left California, in 1981, and lived about 23 years in Oregon, in Eugene, Oregon. And then the last 20 years, I've been in Utah, where I worked until 3 years ago. I worked 18 years with Grand Canyon Trust, which is a Colorado Plateau conservation organization, centered in Flagstaff, but in the Colorado Plateau state. So I worked out of Utah, and then retired just at the end of 2020, but carried forward out of Grand Canyon Trust the work I've been doing on bees, and which started in the Colorado Plateau, but as of this year is expanding its work into California. So I'll explain, what I'm going to do is explain just a little bit of the biology of native bees versus the European honeybee, which is the honeybee. It's non-native and invasive. And so at first it'll be pretty much kind of the biology focusing on California, but all that biology is related to the advocacy that we're needing to do regarding honeybees on public lands. So if there's no other questions, I would share my screen. Julie, is it okay to, yeah, here we go. We'll go, let's see, we'll go right here. Does that show up for you all? No?
That looks good, Mary. I can
Okay,
see it. Yeah.
good. So this is really about keeping honeybees away from native bees on California's public lands. And the organization that I head up as a volunteer, although I have do have a half-time staff person, a person working in a bumblebee lab at UC Riverside, and we're working on this issue of trying to end the permitting of honeybee apiaries. Apiaries are groups of hives on Forest Service and BLM lands. So with that, let's see, I'll start, how do I've got this on a different screen. So I've got to figure out how to move this forward. It isn't moving.
Press your button.
Well,
Press the forward and back button.
no, it isn't doing either one. So let me pull this up, and that I should have over on this screen, but it doesn't show up. Just a second. Oh, let's see. I didn't figure out I didn't go through how I move it forward.
Just changed.
Yeah, it did. So let's see there we go. So in California, if you look at every one of those yellow squares, that's represents a different native bee species in California. You have
Wow.
1,500, about 1,600 native bees. They're solitary. And I'll get into that because that makes a big difference on this whole advocacy issue. And what's probably most familiar to you might be bumblebees. They are about 25 species in California. So California has more native bee species than any other state in the US. Second is Arizona with about 1,300. Third is Utah, about 1,100, hence the name Project 1100. If I had started in California, it would be Project 1600. And then there's one non-native social European honeybee species, and bumblebees are social. So I don't know how much you're aware of the different kinds of bees, but there are all kinds. Now, these are common names like fairy bees and digger bees, but they happen to be, Julie, do you see there's someone needing, yeah, excuse me, thank you. They're actually taxonomically different kinds of groups. Sweat bees, which are attracted to sweat. If you are ever out sitting hot and in the sun, you might have a sweat bee visit. There's the bumblebees. Polyester bees are called that because they line their nests with a film that looks like polyester. Squash bees because they specialize on going to squash and mallows. Cuckoo bees actually don't lay their don't gather the pollen and nectar. They go into other bees' nests and kill the babies and get the workers to support their own eggs. And longhorn bees, mason bees, mining bees, and so on. So there's lots of kinds of bees, many of them very small, but it's really fun to start noticing them. Because suddenly the world is a little bit bigger when you start noticing bees other than honeybees. So I'm going to give a little bit of the biology that's really important to follow in terms of the advocacy. And I've said it's the bee broads who are doing almost all the work, which may not surprise you. I'm going to look at the life cycle of a native solitary bee. Remember, that's almost all the 1,600 species of bees in California. The native bumblebee, which is a social bee, and that's 25 species. And then the one species, the European honeybee, Apis mellifera. And if you can, this is the hardest slide to follow and keep track of, but it relates to why honeybees are such a problem for native bees. So if you're a native solitary bee, that's almost all of them, you're going to emerge in the spring or summer, and you're going to mate, and then you're going to go to work. You only have 4 to 6 weeks to live, and you've got to dig or find a nest. Most bees are nest in the soil, but a fair number also nest in twigs and holes and behind bark and so on. Then you go gather pollen and nectar, bring it back to the nest, lay an egg on it, seal that egg off, go get another bunch of pollen and nectar, come back, lay an egg, and you do this. You seal the nest at the end, and if it's a limited size, then you may make several nests before you die. If you're a male bee, you're going to emerge probably a few days before the female bee in the summer. you're going to mate, and that's your job in life. After a bee species has come out, say you're a mason bee, you're one of the mason bees, your whole species will be gone in 4 to 6 weeks and will be surviving in the form of those eggs and larvae. Now, why we call a bumblebee social, a bee is social if it has different jobs for different forms of the bee. And in this case, you have a queen bee comes out by herself. Now, if you see a really big bumblebee this spring, it's almost certain it's a queen bumblebee. She has come out alone. She's been there in the winter, and she's going to come out in the spring, find a place for the colony to nest, gather pollen and nectar to produce initial workers, and then she's going to retreat into the colony and continue to produce workers, which are all female, and toward the end of the season, drones, males, who will come out in the fall, and again, their whole job is just to mate with some what are called virgin queen bees. These will all look different in the nest in terms of their eggs. So the queen bumblebee will die at the end of the season, but these virgin female worker bee, well, they aren't workers, but when they come out in the fall, they will mate with a drone, and then they will individually go through the winter by themselves, and the whole colony will die. And the only thing then that's making it through the winter is these queen bees that will individually, they won't be all near each other. They're going to come out by themselves in the spring. Very different life cycle for the European honeybee. And I'm going to be talking about them in hives. There are feral honeybees that have gotten loose from hives and established colonies. They still are non-native to the US. No honeybee is native to the US. So within a hive, the female queen, there's a queen in the hive, and she will mate, and then she'll spend her life producing eggs within the hive. And again, all the worker bees will be non-reproducing, like these worker bees. I should have put that there. They'll gather pollen and nectar, bring it back to the nest, and they have to gather a lot of nectar because unlike bumblebees, where the colony dies in the fall, the hive is perennial. The queen bee will live some years. And so they've got to get enough nectar to store for the whole hive to live through the winter. Now, any one worker bee only lives 5 to 6 weeks, but they're produced all season long. And the male drones, their job in life is to mate with virgin queen. When this queen bee gets old, and then the emerging virgin queens can tell, they will leave the hive. They will basically kill the queen honeybee, and they will then establish new hives. But again, any one hive, the queen will live for some years, and all season long, this hive will be sending out new workers. Workers will be dying. And so in all of these 3 kinds of bees, solitary, native social, bumblebees, and honeybee, it's the females that are doing all the work. So I hope that isn't too confusing. But then the other
all the work. What's new with that?
yeah, I know. always not all the case. We've got some drones that do a lot of work. So the whole job of a bee is to be eyes and wings for pollen. So the pollen is the male part of a flower found in the anthers. And a bee will be gathering this pollen. In the case of a honeybee, and bumblebees, it'll be on the basket on the back of the leg. In many bees, it's just on hairs, particularly under the abdomen. And they'll also be gathering some nectar. When they fly to the plant, the plant hopes it'll go to the very same species, flies over here, and in bumbling around to get the pollen or the nectar, maybe down here, some of that pollen will land on this stigma, grow a pollen tube down to the ovary where the ovules are, and that's where the seeds will be made. So grasses don't have fancy flowers like forbs do, because they're wind pollinated. And that's one of the reasons they grow so in such masses that they blow pollen on the wind, and there's so many grasses around, some will catch the pollen. But in case of a flower, imagine a rare flower that maybe there's a patch here and some many yards away. The wind won't do it. The whole purpose of a flower is to attract an animal pollinator, bees being the most often pollinators, but of course there's bats, there's flies, there's wasps, but bees are the kind of premier pollinators for many flowers, although certain flowers, like say the yucca, depends entirely on a moth. So it's not the native bees, the bees cannot pollinate everything. So there's three big problems with honeybee hives for native bees. One is the honeybees compete for limited pollen and or nectar. So we might think, oh, there's so much pollen in the air. You know, we even get allergies from grass pollen. Well, that's because they put out a zillion pollen grains to catch on the, be caught on the wind. But in fact, many plants, if you look at them at the end of the day, have no pollen left, and some and or nectar. It's a limited resource. And then particularly with drought, with heat, when the area is overtaken by invasive grasses or whatever, this can be very limited. That's one problem, because the beehives are very, I should have mentioned, a very big bumblebee colony will be like 500 bees. A single box, I think you've all seen honeybee hives. A single box will have about 10,000 bees at the start of the season and 30 to 40,000 by the end of the season when workers have been produced. Then they're stacked up in boxes, and then they're put in apiaries, which are groups of hives in any one given site. And the apiaries can often be 100 boxes. So that's one problem. Another big problem is that honeybees transmit their diseases when they are on a flower or mixing up with native bees. And that can be bacteria, it can be viruses, fungi. And since honeybees are a commercial managed animal like cattle, they are kept in, they are transported all over the country. If they're being brought to California for the almond pollination, they are, as many honeybees as possible can be crammed into a space. And whatever happens when you've got too many animals in one place, they pass diseases to each other. And then when they interact with the native bees, they can pass diseases that the native bees are entirely vulnerable to. And a third one, which is not so obvious, is that native plants need native bees. And the reason is that honeybees are generalist bees. They're not very good at pollinating a lot of flowers, a lot of specific ones. And so they also, they're bred to go to whatever's going to give them the most honey and most nectar and the most pollen in the shortest amount of time. That's often invasive plants. And they will then help reproduce invasive plants, and they ignore rare plants. It takes time to learn how to pollinate a rare plant, although the native bees that are specialized on that know right away. And the honeybees can outcompete and drive away the native bees needed by the native plants. So rare plants in particular are really vulnerable to the presence of too many honeybees. So here's the astounding amount of competition that a hive poses. If you have an ape, let's take this area right here, because this is the most, say, common. If you have a hive that's been brought onto Forest Service or BLM lands for 3 months, if there's 20 hives, well, let's take, this would be most common, would be about 90, let's take about 90 hives as the most common. See by the green in the apiary. If 90 hives are sitting there for 3 months, they're brought after pollinating almond orchard, and then they sit there through the fall, all the time producing new workers. If a apiary of 90 hives sits there for 3 months, it gathers enough pollen to raise 10 million native bees. Now, obviously, it's not one-to-one. They're not taking literally every pollen grain that they take wouldn't have gone, but that's the order of swamping out of native bees that we're talking about, because you're talking about this one bee that is pumping out workers, and in these industrial sites of many, many, many hives. And then you've got a rare native bee, and it's going to a particular plant, and the honeybee is passing a disease to them, or taking the nectar that native bee would take. Again, just 1 month of 20 hives takes the pollen needed to grow a lot of native bees. But when you get up to, and you'll see these kinds of numbers, there are apiaries in California that have 200 hives. If they're there just 1 month, they're taking the pollen that you could raise 5 million native bees on. So this is a huge problem. So you've got honeybee permits that have been given to commercial operators on both Forest Service and BLM lands in California. And there's 2 main types of honeybee operations that want to pay the small fee for getting a permit. One is, after, like I've mentioned, after commercial pollination. All of your almond trees in California, and California raises most of the almonds in the nation, all of those come into flower at about the same time. So there are hundreds and hundreds of semi-trucks filled with hives that bring the bees there. They make their money by renting their bees, Well, then the almond trees are done flowering, and what do with their semi-truck fulls of bees? Well, one of the places some of them want to go is on your Forest Service and BLM lands. They want to get out of the pesticides of the Central Valley. They want to get up where there's a diversity of flowers, and so they go there. The other kind of commercial honeybee operation will be ones that will want to advertise their honey as native wildflower or native bee, native wildflower operations, and say it tastes so good because it's been gathering on these wildflowers other than, say, just alfalfa. And that'll be in some of your upscale shops, for instance, and people will think, oh, I'm not going to do alfalfa honey, I want to do wildflower honey. Well, that's probably coming from a public land. And these are, yeah, what? Was there a question? No. These are big.
There was one chat question about what about Apis urtica, the Trigona, and Melipona stingless bees of Central America, all honeybees and natives.
About that there are honeybees that are native elsewhere, yes. Is that, I'm not seeing the chat question. What was the question?
I guess they were wondering, I'm not quite sure. Maybe KO can come into the chat and say what they're clarifying, but they just said, what about Apis urtica, the Trigona, and Melipona stingless bees of Central America?
Yeah, well, those are
natives.
They make honey because they're a social bee and they're native there. And of course, those systems are adapted to them. If plants have evolved with them, and so have the other bees. So, yeah,
actually,
absolutely, there are I think 7 species of honeybees, and then that's not even of Apis, and then that's not even counting, like she's mentioning, the Melipona. I don't know how to pronounce it. The Melipones or bees. It's a different group. But yeah, there are honeybees elsewhere. There's no honeybees native to the U.S.
No, that's not true. Apis nearctica was here in the middle Miocene, and there was a native in the Americas.
In the U.S., there are currently no native honeybees. And yes, in South America and in Asia, there are some native honeybees.
And in Guatemala and southern Mexico, they're a very important group of bees.
Absolutely.
And they need to be respected.
Absolutely. Where they are native, absolutely.
Also, I'm sorry, I just have to pick a point with you. The industrial beekeepers have made it so that the queen bees in hives that are used in the orchards only last a year if you're lucky. When I first started beekeeping, they lasted for 7 years. So they're not able to raise millions of offspring anymore.
Yeah, but they are restored. There's no question that pesticides and mites and so on are really hard on these cramped European honeybees, but they are restored every year. They're a managed animal. There are more honeybees, European honeybees, now in the world than there ever were. So they are able to be restored.
But it's not true that there are more than there have ever been. Internationally, the honeybee population is on decline.
No,
for the last 40 years.
I gotta disagree with you. There's more honeybees in the world now than ever.
It's your show. I'm sorry. It's just I had to say something because it really is counter my own experience as a beekeeper of 20-something years.
Right. You might want to check with Xerces International, the main NGO that is the invertebrate conservation main NGO in the country, and they will explain that there are more honeybees now than ever before. And in many urban areas, as well as the public lands areas, they are a real threat to the native bees because of so many honeybee, urban honeybee keepers. These ones that are on the federal lands, and I'd be glad to talk with you later and give you resources on that. These are big operations on the federal lands, often 100, 200 hives for one apiary site. And I'm going to explain, on one BLM field office in California, the permit is for 53 apiary sites. So we're talking billions, as in bee, of honeybees being let loose on the public lands. Another thing about them, they're permitted without any knowledge of or attention to this, whatever sensitive native bees and rare native plants are in the area. It's really hard to study how many there are of a given native bee species. We do know that bees are declining worldwide. There's a kind of a insect apocalypse right now with climate change and land use changes. And so they are have been being permitted on the public lands with, kind of a rubber stamp. You apply for it, you get your permit. They're permitted without any public notice. The only way we can find out where apiaries are on the public lands is by Freedom of Information Act. It isn't posted anywhere. You wouldn't know whether on a ranger district near you or a field office near you was just permitted 50 apiary site permit. And it's not necessary on the public lands. In truth, most commercial honeybee operations are not on Forest Service or BLM lands. It's very much like cattle. Most ranchers are ranching on private land. And where the European honeybee should be being raised for its pollinator purposes and its honey production is on agricultural lands, not on the Forest Service or public lands. And then going to the National Environmental Policy Act, they are currently on BLM and Forest Service lands permitted via categorical exclusion. That's for short called a CE. That means when someone applies for a permit for, say, 50 apiaries, the Forest Service or BLM can permit it with no public input, no review, no assessment, because a categorical exclusion from NEPA is for those categories of actions that can have no significant impact. The categorical exclusion was allowed as a category for permitting of honeybees back in the 1980s when it was just thought they were benign. At that time, the science wasn't out that they outcompete native bees, that they pass the diseases to native bees, that they threaten rare native plants. So what you have in California is on the national forests, we have found through Freedom of Information Act, there are 10 permits on 6 national forests, on the Cleveland, Klamath, Mendocino, Modoc, Sequoia, and Stanislaus. And some of these permits don't list how many hives are being permitted. They only list how many sites they have apiaries at. But our best guess is that it's about 4,000 different hives. Project 1100, which works with Xerces and Center for Biological Diversity, and we're going to be working with the California Native Plant Society. We're focusing in the National Forest on California on Stanislaus National Forest, where there's 2 permits that expire at the end of this year. And we're going to be trying to get the forest to not renew those permits with a categorical exclusion. The John Bayer permit, they're both on Miwok Ranger Station, Ranger District, and this one's on Miwok and Calaveras. This permit has 35 apiary sites. That is a very, very big operation. This one has 15 apiary sites.
I've seen the bunch apiaries because I live just on the edge part of the time of that district of the forest. So we have a lot of talking to do.
Yeah, and I'm gonna at the last slide, I'm gonna say what can be done because this is really important.
Yeah. Okay.
This
great.
is a picture. Down here is a picture. This is a painting. This is a picture of how you would have apiaries. They are often in the open area because they want to be near meadows where the wildflowers are. So they are generally parked fairly near roads and near meadows. When you come to BLM lands in California, remarkably, there's only 3 permits right now active on BLM lands in California. In Central Coast, Mother Lode, and Redding field offices. These 2 in the Central District office, and this one in the Northern District office. And again, we're focusing on 1. That's the Steve E. Park permit for 53 apiary sites. His permit doesn't say how many hives there are per apiary, but I have a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request in about that. He's one of these that pollinates almond orchards where the honeybees mix with other honeybees that may be diseased, and then he takes his hives back to the Redding BLM for the rest of the year. So this too is a permit that expires New Year's Eve this year. And we're going to be trying to get the Redding field office to not renew that with a CE, that they should have to do an assessment, which they really don't want to have to do. It costs a lot of money to do an environmental assessment.
Hey, Mary,
Yeah.
do you want to answer questions in the chat as they come, or do you want to save it
No,
to the end?
no, because I can't do 2 things at once. So
I
I've
understand.
only got 2 more slides, and then I'd be glad to handle all the questions and go
Okay,
back in
perfect.
slides if I need to. So what we'll be doing in California, this is the first year we're coming into California. We've been working in Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Western Colorado, and Oregon. And Oregon has no permits on their forests, and only in the Malheur field office of BLM do they have 2 permits that expired December 31st. And so far the permittee has not asked for coming back on. So if that's the case, Oregon and Washington have no honeybee permits on their Forest Service or BLM lands. California has more. I don't know yet about Nevada. We're going to be finding out about Nevada. Anyways, what we're doing, we're working together with Xerces, Center for Biological Diversity, California Native Plant Society, and numerous scientists. And what we do, and this is happening next week, a letter is going out to every single, a separate letter is going out, well, a separate email, but personalized email to every field office manager, every district office manager, every district ranger, and every forest supervisor with a letter explaining why permitting honeybees is a real threat to their native bees, and their native plants. This has something we've been doing all through the Colorado Plateau. When I get a response from any of the field office or any of the managers, it's thank you. I didn't know about this. I've given this to our wildlife biologist. I will let you know if someone applies for a permit and so on. So that letters, by the end of next week, everyone in California, those district rangers and forest supervisors, field office managers, and district managers will have all gotten a letter. We're keeping track of every apiary permit. We send a FOIA to every national forest every 6 months to see if anyone new, and every BLM, every state, every regional office, every 6 months to see, are there new permits? So we have right now a complete set of all the permits that are active in California, the Colorado Plateau, Oregon, and so on. For those who have an expiring permit, we warn them, we send a special letter that has the science and the legality and the reasons we're saying, look, you have been told you can renew it with a CE. You cannot, because you will be having significant environmental impacts on native plants, which are considered extraordinary circumstances and which invalidate issuing any permit with a CE if the activity could harm the rare plants or rare bees. And so far in 4 years, no one has renewed a permit by a CE in where we've been working. We have not been working in California. If one is renewed, and there's one that's possibility of being renewed in northern Utah right now, we would challenge them in court, because it is not true that the honeybee apiaries will have no significant impacts on the native plants or native bees. And then nationally, we have what's called Administrative Procedure Act petition to the BLM and the Forest Service to just end that, telling their managers that they can issue permits by CE. We are not out there on the media. We're not flashy. We're not trying to get huge numbers of members, because if we become very public, the honeybee industry could do something like put a rider on a bill in Congress that says, oh, Forest Service and BLM managers must permit honeybee apiaries, something like that. And we would have no way to stop it. So this is not the kind of advocacy that is out there in anyone's face. So far, for 4 years, we've been convincing managers to not renew permits. That's what we hope will happen here in California. And last of all, what you can do, I listed the forests and the field offices that have permits. If your broadband is near one of those forests, and you tell me that you're near one of those forests and give me, the name of your broadband leaders and address, I'll keep you informed of what's going on that forest. And also, it really helps if you would photograph apiaries when you see them. Count how many hives are in the apiary, even if it's like close to it. Tell the location and let us know, and we'll let you know if that's one that's legitimately there by a permit, and tell you, when does that permit expire and so on. It'd be very helpful for you to do that. It's also important for you to share your knowledge of how native bees are threatened by honeybees. I know at my local organic food store where I go in Moab, they had a book there for sale called Growing Wildflowers for Honeybees. And I went up to the person where I was checking out my groceries, and I said, what we really need is growing flowers for native bees. He said, well, the honeybees are endangered. I said, no, they're not. They're not endangered. Yes, they get made sick by pesticides. Yes, they get sick by pathogens in their hives, but they're not endangered. And I know I disagree with one of your people, but they're doing fine. Who is endangered is the native bees. So, and like I mentioned, let us know if your broadband, if I had a list of which California broadbands are near a forest that I listed with a permit, I would be glad to put you in our database and just keep you informed. For instance, if you're near the Stanislaus National Forest, I would be glad to tell you what happens when we send a letter later this year, as soon as we can, actually in the next month probably, saying don't renew that permit in December this year without doing an environmental assessment. So with that, I'd be glad to deal with questions if you could read them to me from the chat.
Okay, thank you, Mary. That was very informative, and it sounds like you're working hard and doing a lot behind the scenes. So we appreciate you, and we appreciate all the work that you're doing. Julie, do you want to read off a couple of questions? We have about 6 minutes for questions.
Yeah, we have one from Allison that says, I wonder how the one species of apis got domesticated and got people to take care of them.
I think I think they were first brought to the US in the 1700s. I think for many, many hundreds of years, I don't know, perhaps, I don't really know the history, maybe thousands of years, people had noticed that the honeybees, not just the one species that's in the US, but these other honeybees have honey and could be kept, could be encouraged to live in a home that they took care of and from which they extracted the honey and retained the bees without, killing all the bees. They could take their honey. That's how a honeybee hive is set up. So it isn't that the European honeybee is the only one that can serve this purpose. Interestingly, though, while it's thought, okay, yes, your almonds in California are dependent on honeybee pollination, but that's not because they're the best pollinators. Actually, blue orchard bees are an Osmia lignaria is better at pollinating, but they're a solitary bee. They can live near each other in like tubes, like you can have in a bee hotel, but they don't have a queen. They don't have a division of labor. They're each female on her own for provisioning the nest, and there has not been success at raising them like you can raise honeybees.
Mary, can you stop sharing your screen so we can see each other again? And Maureen, it looks like you've got your hand up. Did you have a question for Mary?
Yes, Mary, I live near Stanislaus Forest, right in the midst of it, actually. And I know those hives well, so I'm looking forward to working with you. Your timing may be perfect because almond farmers are going bankrupt right and left right now. And a large number of them are in eastern Stanislaus County and in that area of the Central Valley. our
Is that because
closest,
of drought or because of the rain,
that,
so much
that-
rain?
it's drought, it's China's economy, and it's the new groundwater aquifer recharge laws.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how close Beth is to Mendocino Forest and the area you're talking about in that forest, but perhaps that's a little far from where she is in the redwoods, but I can throw a rock from my window into the Stanislaus Forest, so we'll talk.
I would love to talk with you, Maureen,
Yeah.
because it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah,
And it was
yeah.
just yesterday, I was speaking with the conservation director and associate conservation director of the California Native Plant Society, and they're really excited at
Were you
working
talking
at
to Nick?
Nick Jensen.
Yeah, I
and
was, we were on the phone with him earlier today, so not a
oh my
problem.
gosh, isn't that something?
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
And Brandon
Yeah,
Kilsey?
Brendan too, same phone
Yep.
call.
Yep. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Well, and Mary, I want to get a couple more of these questions before we got to keep going. But Gordon also asked, has anyone done a study by determining numbers of natives before introduction of Apis mellifera and then determining the numbers of native bees after introduction?
Yes, there's quite a number of studies. If you go to the website that I have, project1100.org, spell it all out. And under the page on science, it's a very simple website. It's not changing all the time. It's not terribly fancy. There's some really good studies that have been done on that. And it's often like studies have been done. Okay, here's the apiaries. How many native bees are, 100 yards away, 300 yards away, 700 yards away, and you always see that there's then more native bees the further you are from the honeybee hive. There's a lot of studies. They're hard to do, as you can imagine, trying to count solitary native bees. It's like worse than trying to herd cats. But some amazing research has been done. A really interesting study for those of you who want to wade through a scientific study is on camas, which is culturally important plant in California. A really interesting study that when it's visited by honeybees, it does worse than if it wasn't even visited by honeybees. Plus, it discourages and drives away native bees, which are essential for its pollination. So yes, there are studies on this. Hard to do.
All right, I think that's all we have time for, Julie, because we've actually put together a slide presentation of each of our broadbands, and we want to give each of our broadband leaders a chance to introduce their broadband and themselves and take 5 minutes each for the broadbands. So if we could share screen and get that presentation up, then we can get started with that.
And I'm hoping to stay and watch all this.
Oh, thank you, Mary. I was going to say, you don't have to stay.
I know, I want to. I want to, yeah.
Maureen,
Yes?
Margaret,
Yeah.
could we ask Mary to put the website in the chat, please?
Thank
I
you,
put
Beth.
project1100.org in.
Yep. Project1100.org. Just spell it out right.
All right. Next slide.
Well, I come from the origin of Great Old Broads. This is Maureen Forney speaking. And I want to tell you that before 2016, there were broadbands in California, but for various reasons, founders and early members who are still involved in the broads, but the broad leaders are no longer leading those broadbands who were in Walnut Creek in the Sierra Nevada foothills. So broadbands were kind of quiet. But then I decided I was looking for some hiking friends, and I called Great Old Broads for Wilderness, talked to an associate director, ended up and waltzed the leadership training, and here we are. Next slide, please. Julie, thank you. And I became the middle California broadband leader. So we drew a 100-mile radius from my house in San Leandro. And that went on for quite a bit. And I tried to do all the things that a broadband leader might try to do. And then Margaret came along, and NorCal and SoCal broads were born. You will see when you go to the website for my new band, Crest to Coast Broadband, formerly NorCal, that project, that landing page is being rebuilt and updated. But go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. And with our, I was going to say reformed, that's probably not the right word to use, with our reconstructed, reconfigured broadbands, with many of us as leaders, you're going to meet us all tonight. The Crest to Coast Broadband serves the counties, or we're going to attempt to, that you see listed there. You'll also see my contact information, and I do use Google Voice for this work. So if you want to take a screenshot or write down that phone number, yes, I welcome your phone calls as well as your emails. Next slide, please. So this is a diagram, a map, if you will, of the McCullamy Coast to Crest Trail. And that is the inspiration for our name, the Crest to Coast Broads. The segment in blue, purple, and orange are the parts of the trail that are actually constructed. And it's quite a lovely trail. But the watersheds that you see in that map, we'll talk about in the next slide, please. So our name is inspired by the McCullamy Crest to Coast Trail. And this new broadband aspires to, I left out a word, to address the needs and interests of members who live in that region. Take a moment, if you will, to read what we did in 2023. That's just a short list of our activities. We'll pause for about 20 seconds for you to read that before we go to the next slide. Next slide, please. So remember, we were formerly the NorCal Broadband, and Margaret and I divided the state from the Tehachapi's north and the Tehachapi's south. And but now the Crest to Coast Broadband is what you just saw described. Please be prepared if you are a Crest to Coast Broadband leader, or if you, member, or if you want to join us, and because you have some connections to the area, you can belong to more than one broadband at a time. Our first meeting will be on April 25th. That will be a Zoom meeting. And we intend to meet the fourth Thursdays thereafter. But get ready, put your walking shoes on, put your debit card or some jingle in your wallet, because we're going to meet on May 1st at California Trails at the Oakland Zoo. Why? Because the wolves live there, and the wolf pack howls at noon on the first Wednesday when the local emergency services test the air raid sirens. And people come from all over. Yeah, I know. We learned how to howl at a few broadblocks. The photographers and people come from all over to enjoy the wolves. But the California Trails at the zoo is a wonderful opportunity because they have a fantastic conservation program to learn about California endangered species. And we'll talk about migratory corridors while we're there as well, and enjoy lunch. Put that pair of shoes away and put on your dancing shoes, because we're going to have a concert at Freight and Salvage in Berkeley at 7 p.m. It'll be primarily bluegrass music, fiddle music, headliners Lori Lewis. I have a deep well of thanks to Sarah Husby for enthusiastically deciding that we were going to be the lead sponsor of this event. And through June to December, you see that we have a lot of things to talk about and plan. I thought I could do a lot of that planning right here or ahead of time, but I think it's far better if we become a broadband of people that collaborate and discuss things together. So the ideas that I have on the slide are just that, ideas. We'll talk them over and plan the remainder of our year. But you see our first 3 events on the calendar. Before I turn this over to the other broad leader, the next person to speak, I wanted to briefly introduce you to Allison Monroe. I think if you're on speaker view, you'll see her quickly, but I'm really pleased to say Allison has been involved since we were NorCal Broadbands. It's longer than you think, Allison, maybe more like 5 or 6 years. And she has applied to attend Waltz this year. So I'm hoping to get to know Allison quite a bit. Allison, if you have anything to say in 30 seconds, now's your chance, girlfriend.
Just that Maureen has told me at random about, well, seemingly random, about so
Nah.
many interesting events in the last 5 years. And I just, whenever she asked me to go to an event, I went, and it's been a big part of my life. I don't know what she's up to, but why are people asking me on these events all the time? It'll be fun, and I wouldn't miss this waltz thing for anything. I'm an organizer in another totally other field, and I hope I can help. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Allison was my partner on the canoe on the Tuolumne River.
Oh, yeah,
I
got
have
so wet.
pictures.
Yeah, we rode underwater in canoes, I think. I mean,
Yeah, it was a submarine event.
yeah, riding on submarine breadsticks. Yeah.
Yeah, on the Tuolumne. We were supposed to be watching salmon, but other things happened.
Okay, I guess it's my turn.
Yeah.
The Inland Empire is Riverside and San Bernardino counties. And so we do, the Cleveland Forest is important to us, Mary O'Brien. So you can write that down. And then I'm standing next to this Adopt a Park trail sign because it's sponsored by Great Old Broads for Wilderness. So I actually got something done, and my husband and I like to go out and collect trash on this trail. And it's used a lot by bicyclists and people walking, and it's in the city. It's not out somewhere. It's just actually in our city, but I'm pretty proud of getting this done. Next slide. This is one of the first events I ever went to. It was Hurricane Island in Maine. So I didn't know what to expect, but guess what? We had a lot of fun. And that's what I think Great Old Broads is known for. We bring the fun. So I wanted to share that slide. And then this one showing L'Oreal and I at a special event in Ramona called Hawk Watch. And we had so much fun there. We've determined next year we're going to have a lot of involvement. Every single weekend we're going to help out. And then this other picture of me is at the University of California, Riverside. There was a climate summit, and I was one of the few people to show up and actually table, but it was a huge event. It was a lot of people, so I was proud to make all of those connections. All right, go ahead. Next slide. I think you're up, Beth.
Oh, hi, everybody. I'm Beth Lamb, and I just started the Sonoma and Marin Counties Redwood Broadbands, and I'm formerly a geologist, and I'm also a docent at Armstrong Redwoods State Park. You want to go to the next slide? So here, this is a picture of me telling some kids in the rain about redwood trees. My area of focus is going to be redwood forest preservation and restoration. I'm passionate about opening up redwood forests for public use. I also am interested in coastal ecology and restoration. Environmental education is really important to me. I love teaching kids. And last weekend I did a North Bay Science Discovery Fair. It was just so much fun. So hopefully we can do some environmental education stuff in my broadband. My broadband is pretty new. We've had 3 different events so far. We did a geology walk. We did 2 book author events, and then we got together and walked around the redwood forest. And then next slide. So we will have a hike this Sunday at Pomo Canyon with it's going to be a wildflower walk. I went out there and pre-hiked it on Monday, and it's awesome. Out there. The flowers are crazy. The trillium are in bloom, and we even found some calypso orchids out there. And we're going with somebody from the California Native Plant Society.
That's perfect. I forgot to mention that we're going kayaking this Saturday for my broadband. So anybody who wants to join us kayaking Saturday or join Beth for a wildflower walk, you know.
So I'm Redwood Broads at greatoldbroads.org.
Thank you, Beth. Next slide.
So Christine unfortunately didn't feel well and she had to get off.
Okay.
Margaret, do you want to do hers for or Maureen?
I'll go.
Yeah, go ahead. Maureen.
So this area that Christine Green is now representing was in the NorCal broadband area, though I have to say we haven't done a lot of work over on the east side. So think about the Eastern Sierra, Mammoth Lake, June Lake, Bodie, etc. Inyo and Mono counties. A lot of mining concerns there, as well as historical concerns around water. And her focus areas are as follows. Again, like before, I will pause for about 30 seconds so you can read this and know who and what are doing things on the Eastern Sierra. Next slide, please. Julie? Oh, there we go. This is pretty dense. I invite you to get on the wait list if you haven't already signed up for the Eastern Sierra Broadband Regional. Actually, this is a national event, Broadwalk. So along with staff, Christine is hosting her first event, as it says, in the shadow of the Owens River Wilderness. And this is an immense span of land. If you've never been to the Eastern Sierra, it's so different than the Western Slope. And I'm pretty darn fond of it. And what a spectacular opportunity and trip this Broadwalk will be. People who attend this event will be learning about the focus areas with some things that I think in the next slide may be specified. Again, I guess it's not there. I believe that this is currently a full event, but we do have wait lists. Whenever you go to the greatoldbroads.org site, you can find a list of our events. The 3 I mentioned are going to be posted there as soon as I get back from our desert camping trip that many of us are going on next week. And you'll be able to find a lot of events. And the first one that Christine has scheduled is the Eastern Sierra Broadband, Eastern Sierra Broadwalk, camping at June Lake and learning more about the focus areas that you read about in the previous slide there. I'm sorry that she's not here to talk about this with the passion and enthusiasm she has for her area, but you'll enjoy getting to know Christine. If you're in her broadband, welcome. We're glad you're here. Next
Yeah,
slide.
and she is similarly to Beth is pretty new and getting going. And as Margaret said, these broad walks are very broads. So these are very indicative of who we are as organizations, or these focus on different areas and focusing on stewardship and education. So thank you for that, Maureen.
Thank you for those important words, Julie. Helen. Helen,
are you there?
Helen, are you there? Do you want to introduce your broadband?
She was there earlier. I saw her come in.
Well, I can say it for
Your
her real
turn.
quick then.
I don't see her in the list anymore.
Okay, so this was an
Sorry.
event we did in San Pedro at the aquarium, and Helen came out and she talked to people and got people signed up for her broadband right there on the spot. And I did a presentation about healthy forests. And it was so fun to work together. I really enjoy working together with other broadband leaders, like when L'Oreal and I do things together. So I really appreciated her supporting me at this event. Next slide.
And I will say Helen said she had to go, but she says, I love you all to everyone and you inspire me to no end. So thank you for taking over. Sorry, it's Margaret.
I talked to her about her broadband. She's taking over all of LA County. But when I asked her, I said, Helen, how many people are in your neighborhood? She said 90,000. 90,000 people are in her neighborhood. So she's going to have a great broadband eventually. Next slide. This is the current national monument proposal expanding the Santa Monica Mountains. I thought this was a pretty slide. Okay, next slide.
Yep. And Helen's also getting up and going, so more to come. But as Margaret just said, there are a lot of people in her area. So if you know people in that area that would like to join Broads, please hook them up with Helen.
All right, it's my turn. I'm Laura Latzit. So I've got the new San Diego Wild Spaces broadband, and I'm covering San Diego County as well as Imperial County. And this area used to be covered all by Margaret. So I am so lucky that I'm kind of continuing to partner with Margaret. So if you're up in her area, you know, you're always welcome to do things down here in San Diego, and vice versa. Because I'm pretty new, so I've got lots of ideas, and just really getting going. I kind of bring something a little different to the, you know, the focus on wilderness, because I also come at it through the lens of the arts as well to engage people. So let's move to the next one. And right now, my big focus is with Tecolote Canyon Natural Park. The thing about San Diego is we have a lot of mesas and canyons. So we have this urban wildlands interface, and that's really where I'm going to be focusing, because we do have a lot of wildlands within our urban environment. So I work with some nonprofits leading hikes with children to help educate them. And I'm going to try to include more Broads into helping in that area, as well as doing a lot of habitat restoration in our local canyons. So let's go to the last slide. I have a lot of ideas. I'm gathering my leadership team, and then we will start planning events. So I haven't gotten a lot of events yet. But some of the issues down here that I want to focus on is maybe another future national monument up in our surrounding mountains by working with the Chaparral Lands Conservancy. There's a big focus down here on rewilding with our marshes and wetlands in this area. So that's, you know, really important. And then I also am a docent with San Diego Natural History Museum, and we're hoping to partner, and I want to bring the Broads into this to help do citizen science in our native canyons around here, because they're starting this huge study of the urban ecology and how we can help save our wildlands that we have left here. And they're going to also be working with the LA Natural History Museum and some other organizations. So I'm real excited about getting the Broads involved in that at this point. So that's San Diego.
That's wonderful. Thank you, L'Oreal.
May I please say something as the elder amongst us?
Yes, you may.
Not elder in years, perhaps. I don't know. I don't care. But elder in terms of tenure. What you have just witnessed, if you're new to the Broads, is the vast amount of networking we do with a wide variety of groups, some that weren't even mentioned during our slide presentation: California Wilderness Coalition, Tuolumne, California Native Plant Society, Third Act. The list is long and varied. But no one is a better networker than Margaret. And I have to tell you, as we transition into this multi-leader model and new leaders to come, you know that Waltz is beckoning Allison. Margaret has been extraordinary, and I couldn't ask for a better partner, even if we were divided by the transverse range called the Tehachapis. I was at an event in Sacramento and had someone come over and poke me on the shoulder, and he says, "You're Margaret's friend. I'm Margaret's friend too." And then it turned out they'd been at an event in Riverside together. So you can't, everywhere you go, Margaret's name is there if the Broads come up. So I want to thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Maureen.
I really want to thank you, and I want to say to those of you who are new leaders on this call and leaders to be, what an absolute honor and joy to have an opportunity to launch this today and do the work that I know we're going to do with these amazing broads and bros that are on the call and those that we have yet to meet. It's a real joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. I feel the same. We have so much support as leaders. We have staff support. We have each other. And I always look forward to any activities or events we can do together. So great. Education, stewardship, and advocacy. We
And
rock.
fun.
Lots of fun. All right. Any last words of
Questions from
questions,
participants?
comments?
Is Orange County part of a broadband?
I
Julie?
don't think so. My goal is to get every county in California have its own broadband leader. So I think that's a noble goal.
If you are inspired, they're still
That is
taking
a lot of
applications
counties,
for Waltz
Maureen.
through Friday. You can still apply for Waltz and become a leader up through Friday, and you could be the Orange County leader. Oh my God,
That's
you'll
right.
love the training. It's outstanding. It's in Santa Fe, New Mexico. You get really smart there.
That's so fun. That's for sure. Any
And I
other
just-
last? Go ahead,
Oh,
Julie.
I just want to say that as staff, we are very impressed by this call because this is kind of the first time a state or a region has partnered up in the way these 6 broadband leaders have to facilitate such a call. So we are super excited for them to be getting started as this coalition working together for California. So thank you all for making this happen. And thank you all for all the folks that showed up today too.
Yes, we
It's not
appreciate
8
all the
o'clock.
members.
Are there more questions and things we can help you with?
So when is the next quarterly meeting?
3
Should be-
months from now, I have
should
to
be in
turn
June.
something on.
I think it should be in June. It's the second
April, May,
Thursday in
yes.
June.
Yes.
Yes, we'll get that information out to everyone. And
So
we
the
appreciate
13th,
It would be June 13th.
June 13th.
So, and boy, are we going to have a lot to say because Allison, you need to know this. We're all going to the closest thing to a midpoint. We're going to Solvang for several days together to plan
it's a leadership
and
retreat.
converge. Yeah. And that doesn't mean we're going to be doing our nails. That means we're going to be becoming better broad leaders than we are today.
Strategizing.
Yes. Yeah. And it'll be Julie's first trip to California, which I think is the funniest thing in the world.
We got a winer and diner.
I can't
that's
wait.
for
She
sure.
loves us, but Sarah's from California, so we've got great information and connections to Durango, let me tell you.
That's right. Any other questions, comments, anything for the good of the order? Well, I'm happy to say that we brought this in on time, and I'm gonna say good night under
And thank you-
budget.
Thank you to Mary. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you,
thank
yes.
Mary.
We,
Bye,
you to all of you.
everyone.
Really good
Thank
meeting.
you.
This is all really impressive. It's so exciting. You know, my first backpacking trip ever, I had never gone one night. I did the Muir Trail for 30 days. I had never carried a backpack. So I said to my husband, you carry it up to the starting line. I don't even want to know how heavy it is. So he carried it to the starting line. Off I went for 30 days.
wow.
And then for 40 years, I think we've been coming almost every year for 40 years to Death Valley National Park at Christmas. I mean, there's so many places in California you mentioned. I lived in Rialto and Upland, and you know, it's just exciting that you're all getting together. You don't, obviously your different broadbands are going to do different things, but sometimes you can do something all together and help each other. It's really very exciting. You're so fortunate to have so many good leaders. And the goal of one broadband leader in every county is just awesome.
Yeah,
You know,
why not?
I know that we're a victim of our own success because there will be 40 broads. I think that's the number, camping at Aviquame. It's not spelled the way it's pronounced, in Nevada, our newest national monument, next week. So doing more of the same: education, advocacy, stewardship, and fun.
That's right. There's lots of opportunities to get together. So good night, everybody.
All right. Have a
Good
wonderful
night.
evening.
Good
Thank you to
night.
Mike Painter from Calia Wild.
Yeah.
Good
Bye,
night, all.
Mom. Bye, Mary. Bye, everyone.
So long.
All right,
Farewell.
great job. Great job,
I'll be there
Margaret
saying
and
goodbye.
Maureen.